Today we're creating 3D lettering in Procreate with dry media brushes, complete with inner shadow, outer stroke, and a cast shadow. The color palette for this project is free as always. Just tap on the link in the video description and you can download and install it. I'm going to start by creating a brand new canvas. I've listed my specs on screen, and let's begin. This week's tutorial is brought to you by Envato Elements, which is kind of like the Netflix of graphic design. They have tens of thousands of resources available to artists, including stock photos, presentation templates, audio tracks, logos, fonts, and my favorite, Procreate brushes. We're actually going to be using a set from their library for this week's tutorial, and they've generously offered every Tuesday subscribers with a 70% off coupon, which makes it less than $10 a month to try out. It's limited time though, so tap on the link in the video description to grab your coupon, and let's go download our brushes. Okay, let's pick up those dry media brushes. So once you're logged into Envato Elements, up in the search bar, I'm just going to type in Procreate Dry Media and hit search. And then we're going to narrow this down by category. So under Browse by Category, just tap on Add-ons, and it will be the very first one right here with the lion. So just tap on that, and now we're good to go. Download, install, and I will meet you in Procreate. Okay, I've got my brand new canvas. Let's begin by setting our background color. So tap on the background color layer, and it's going to be the first color in the top row. Next, we're going to add in our lettering. So I need to change the color to the third one on the bottom row. I'm going to use a grid for this. That way all my lettering is more consistent than it usually is. So I'm going to hit the wrench, go into Canvas, Drawing Guide, Edit Drawing Guide, and I'm going to change the grid size down here to 125 pixels. It's just going to be a little bit larger so I can make those really big letters depending on the length of your word. And I will increase the opacity and the thickness so you can see it a little bit better on screen, and then hit done. Okay, I've got those dry media brushes all loaded in right here, and this is actually one of my favorite sets that I've downloaded from Envato Elements to date. I have played around with these so much, so once you get them, even if you use them for lettering, you will end up finding other ways to use them. It's such a great set. For the lettering, I'm going to use this inkling brush, and let me see what the size is. Feels pretty good. My brush size is about 30%, and I'm going to write the word yeah, which is why I have a larger grid size. If your word is longer, just reduce your grid size and it'll make it a little bit easier to keep everything really consistent. I'm going to center this on my canvas now, and I'm going to go up from center just a little bit vertically. Now that I've got my word all set, I can turn off my guidelines. So just go back to the wrench, canvas category, toggle off drawing guide, and now we're ready to add all of our really fun effects to this. So the first effect I'm going to add on is an outer stroke, and there's a neat little trick that you can do for this. Until Procreate adds on layer styles, if you're familiar with Photoshop, this is the best process that I've discovered for creating an outer stroke. So what you want to do is come to your lettering layer, tap in the layer thumbnail and choose select. Make sure color fill is not selected down here, otherwise this won't work right. And then create a brand new layer. We're going to fill this one with our lightest color, so it's the first one on the bottom row. So tap on that color, come back to your layers palette, tap on the layer thumbnail and choose fill layer. So now you have the exact same thing, only it's a different color now. Next, we're going to make this a little bit larger by adding a Gaussian blur to it. So with this lighter colored lettering selected, I'm going to come to the magic wand, choose Gaussian blur, slide this up. You don't want to go too far. I'm going to come up to 5%. And then you just want to select it again. So tap on the layer thumbnail, choose select, come back to the layer, tap on the layer thumbnail and choose fill layer. So this is going to create a larger version of this lettering. So I'm just going to repeat that like 3 times. Select, fill layer, select, fill layer. And you'll notice that the edges are becoming a little harder. They were really soft before, and now it's really filling out. So that's the purpose of this. If this feels too fast at any point in time, because it is a more advanced tutorial, you can always slow me down by hitting the little gear icon in the lower right corner of the YouTube player, and then just change the playback speed. So now this is larger than our red lettering. You can see right there. So what we want to do is take the red lettering and remove it from this lighter colored lettering, and that will give us an outer stroke. So I'll show you how to do that. We want to come to the red lettering layer, tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select, come down here and choose invert, come back to your layers, tap on the layer thumbnail for the lighter colored lettering, and then choose mask, and then deselect. And now you can see we've got an outer stroke on this. This is still looking a little soft for me along the edges, and I want to harden it up a little bit more so it looks more defined as a stroke instead of a glow. So in order to do that, first I need to merge my mask with my layer and make it permanent. So I'm just going to pinch these two together, and then I'm going to tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select. And then with my brush, with this inkling brush still selected and this color still selected, the light color, I'm going to paint over it. And it'll be subtle, but the more times you go over it, the harder that outline will get. So you can do that as many times as you want. I usually do it like 3 or 4 times. So that's a much harder outline for me, which is what I wanted. Now I'm going to add an inner shadow to the lettering, so it looks like the stroke is sitting just a little bit above the actual lettering. This is one of my favorite details when it comes to 3D lettering. So what you want to do is, with this outer stroke selected, we're going to select it. So tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select, create a brand new layer. We're going to change this color to the dark red. So tap on the last color on the second row, come back to your layers, tap on the new layers thumbnail and choose fill layer. So now we have that same stroke, only it's a different color. I'm going to drag this red layer underneath the stroke so you can kind of see it right there. And then I'm just going to select it and tap it down a little bit. So you're going to start seeing it come into view. So there it is. And you can decide if you want a hard inner shadow or a soft one. So this one would be considered hard because I can see that rough edge. I want to soften this up a little bit. So you can either use a Gaussian blur or you can use a motion blur. Either one is fine. Let's use the motion blur. So I'm going to hit the magic wand and choose motion blur, and I'm just going to pull it down just a little bit because motion blur can kind of get out of control if you go too much. So I'm just going to pull it down like 10%. You can see that amount right up here. And I'm just dragging it straight down. I just kind of drew a line with my stylus, and that looks good. So it looks great on the inside of the lettering. We have a really nice inner shadow, but you can see it's poking out under here, and we don't want it to look that way because we're going to add an extrusion layer so it looks even more 3D. If you like this, you can totally leave it. I'm going to get rid of it, and I want to show you how to get rid of it. So what you want to do is come into your layers, come to the red lettering layer, tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select. Come back to your layers, come to the dark red inner shadow layer, tap on the layer thumbnail and choose mask. And that will remove any of the inner shadow that went beyond the bounds of the red lettering. So I'm going to deselect that. And this is our lettering so far. The next thing we're going to do is add an extrusion layer so it looks like this is popping off the screen a bit more, and then we'll add a cast shadow layer. So for the extrusion layer, there's a couple ways you can do it. The simplest way would be to grab the red letterings layer and just create the extrusion off of that. But our lettering got a little bit larger because we added this outer stroke to it. So if we want to include that as well, that's technically the right way to do it, but it's going to require an extra step. So if you're not ready for the extra step, you can just use the red lettering layer. I'm going to show you the technically correct way to do this. So what you want to do is group everything you have together, duplicate this group, and then flatten this group. So tap on the layer thumbnail and choose flatten. And all we wanted this group for, this flatten group for, was to select it. So now I'm going to tap on the layer thumbnail and choose select. So now I've selected everything. So it includes the stroke and the base lettering. And now I can create a brand new layer, and I'm going to use the darkest green for this. So tap on the last color on the top row, and then tap on the layer thumbnail and choose fill layer. Now I can remove this flatten layer. That's all I needed it for, was just to get that selection. So now you can see that this soon-to-be shadow layer is the entire size of my lettering, the outer stroke plus the base lettering. I'm going to drag that underneath everything that I've done so far, so we can't see it yet. So we need to create that depth now, and I do this with a motion blur. So with this shadow layer selected, I'm going to come to my magic wand, choose motion blur, tap and drag to the right, down and to the right, and I'm only going up to like 20%. It's not super crazy. And then release, deselect. Now we need to make this edge match this edge. So we need to move it down a little bit. So I'm going to select it, and it usually kind of snaps into place once you get it there. And there we go. So that looks more realistic, but you can see how soft that edge is. So I'm going to harden it up just like we did before by tapping on the layer thumbnail, select, fill layer, and I'll do this 3 times. So I've hardened it up a little bit, but you can see this edge is poking out, so I need to move it over even a little bit more than I had it before, and there we go. That snaps pretty nicely. So you can leave this exactly as it is, but this has that kind of soft edge, and I'm using a dry media brush set, so I want some really pretty texture in here. So I'm actually just going to use this as a template and paint that layer in with one of our brushes. So I'm going to reduce the opacity of this so I can hardly see it, but I know where it is now. Create a brand new layer right above it, and I'm going to use that same color, the dark green, but I'm going to switch my brush to this dry brush right here. And let's see the size of this. That feels pretty good. I'm at about 30%, and I'm just going to trace where those edges are. And now I'm getting some really nice texture in here. And this is pressure sensitive, so you can play with that where you need to, press a little harder to get thicker stroke. And now I can just turn off my template layer, and I can see how it looks. And I like that much better because I've got that nice texture right there. So there's a couple of extra details I want to add in. I want to add in an inline to the lettering just to add a little bit more visual interest to the center of it. Since we have some pretty thick lettering, it lends itself to an inline really well. And then I also want to create a cast shadow. So a cast shadow is, say that this is the depth, this is how you're looking at your lettering, but the cast shadow appears depending on where the sun is in the sky. And a cast shadow always looks better if it's the opposite direction of your extrusion. So if my extrusion is going this way, my cast shadow I want to go this way. So I'm going to come back to this template layer and just tap on the layer thumbnail, choose select, create a brand new layer, and this time I'm going to fill it with the 3rd one on the top row. So tap on that, tap on the layer thumbnail, and choose fill layer. So I'm using that existing shape, but now I'm going to push it in this direction. I'm doing the same thing I did with my extrusion, only I'm going to cast it the opposite direction. So with this one selected, I'm going to tap on my magic wand, choose motion blur, and just drag it to the left, and just be aware of how much you're dragging it. I'm going to go up to let's do 22%. And now I can, once again, tap on the layer thumbnail, select, fill layer. And I don't do this too many times. I do it fewer times for the cast shadow because I want it to be a softer shadow because it is a shadow. It's not part of the 3D lettering. So you can see it's poking out, so I need to move this again. So I'm going to select it, and I want this edge to line up with my dark green edge this time. So we'll see if it can kind of snap into place there. So you can see that that's nicely cast. I'm going to add in that inline now. So I'm going to create a brand new layer above everything because it's going to be on top of the lettering we already created. So create a brand new layer. I'm going to switch to the 2nd color on the 2nd row, and we're going to change brushes again. I'm going to try the sketch brush up at the top. And let's see the size. That feels pretty good. The size of this one is about 50%, 50. So I'm just going to come through, and this one is also pressure sensitive, and I'm only putting it where the thickest strokes are. That way I don't create any visual tension of the line getting too close to the edges. Okay, and then the background just seems like it needs something, so I'm going to come all the way to the bottom, create a brand new layer underneath all the layers that have visibility. I'm going to change my color to the 2nd color on the top row, and let's change the brush again. I'm going to try this chalk dry brush and just give myself a little scribble in the back. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you next week.